I have a job for you.
Jeez, it's not another arc, is it?
No, not again. This time I need a full-scale home renovation.
Noah Construction and Builders is your design and build partner. We do it all, from additions and dormers to full-scale renovations. Schedule your no-cost design consultation today. Visit us online at noahconstruction-builders.com.
Noah Construction and Builders. Through dreams we design, with vision we build.
And, of course, thank you, as always, to our title sponsor, Noah Construction-Builders.com. No job too small nor too big for Noah Construction. Welcome to WGBB Radio, Muscle Sport Media Live, 95.9 FM, 1240 AM every Monday, 7:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. My co-host, Anthony Tuminello, is not here this evening, but I have a very special guest who's going to return to the show. We had him on not too long ago, at NotGuy80 on Twitter. He's almost like the unknown comic. He goes only by at NotGuy80 on all of his social media, but he and I hooked up on Twitter, and baseball, national pastime, will be on the docket. So I'd like to welcome right now to Muscle Sport Media Live, at NotGuy80. What's going on, buddy?
Hey, Joe, how are you? Thanks for having me back.
Oh, always, man. You kidding me? I was very glad you were available this evening to talk a little bit baseball. So we're going to pivot from fitness to baseball, even though Anthony and I, we do cover sports and other things, lifestyle stuff besides fitness. But tonight we have a specific topic, and I enjoyed your post that you put up recently on Twitter with the gif of the Sultan of SWAT, of course, George Herman Ruth, otherwise known as Babe Ruth, the GOAT of all sports. And I believe in both of our opinion. I know mine. Do you feel he's the GOAT in sports overall, not just baseball?
There are certain aspects where he is, for sure, the undisputed GOAT. The thing that I come back to every time with Ruth is that I believe he outperformed his peers, he outperformed his contemporaries and the competition of his era to an extent that we have never seen before or since in any sport. And, you know, there are arguments to be made about it was a pre-integration league and it was inherently limited in certain ways, but under the circumstances of his day, he dominated his sport and his era in, you know, just to an extent that is beyond compare. And there's just no matter how you look at it, that's the conclusion I continue to come to. You know, there are other athletes that have dominated their respective sports in different ways, but I think Ruth is always going to be in the conversation for the greatest of all time across all sports.
I think he not only transcended baseball, he transcended the world as far as, you know, just being such a larger-than-life figure. It wasn't just what he did on the field, it's what he did off the field, and just his popularity. I mean, he completely changed the game of baseball, obviously. I mean, before him, you know, like the game, I mean, Ty Cobb, I read some of his quotes, and some of Ty Cobb's quotes were hysterical about Babe Ruth, and you know, if I wanted to hit homers and stuff, and I kind of believe him. I think if Ty Cobb wanted to be a home run hitter, he could have. He was that good with the stick. But the game of baseball was so different. It was obviously a small ball type of thing, and Babe Ruth came in and had more homers than most teams combined. And it's oddly enough for me is that people might say, oh, you're probably a Yankee fan. You grew up in New York. I'm not. I'm a Met fan. I mean, I'm a baseball fan, but I'm a Met fan. I'm not a Yankee fan. And I like small ball. I like National League, you know, old style pitchers duels and stuff. I'm not a home run guy, but it's just what he was able to do. And it almost seemed like he did it with ease. Do you ever get the impression that Ruth did it? I mean, we know he's, you know, partying and all of that stuff, and he got out of shape later in his career. Do you think that he kind of did it almost with, like, you know, partially still asleep in the hotel room?
I think the game was easier for him than it was for others I think he was just so gifted at what he did. We talk so much about the home runs and the offense with him, but he was an all-time great pitcher before he became a home run hitter. And in fact, if you look at the all-time list of fewest hits allowed per 9 innings, he's way up there. He wasn't just a pitcher; he was a very good pitcher. Once he started out homering entire teams and they knew they wanted that bat in the lineup every day, obviously he became an outfielder and went on to win a dozen or more home run titles. You certainly get the impression that he could have done anything he wanted to do in the game.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, his pitching, it was just some of his numbers, and he pitched on big stage, obviously. I mean, Boston was in the World Series a few times with him. He 10 World Series starts that he had. To me, it's amazing. I also saw another stat recently about him. Sacrifice bunts. They called them sacrifice hits back in the 20s. But in 1930, he had 49 homers, obviously with the Yankees at this point, and 21 sacks. And then he had 113 for his career. And in the year he hit 60, the Murderers Row year, 1927, he had 14 sacrifice bunts. I got to think he did that on his own, right?
Well, so one of the interesting things in doing some further research, because I saw that stat too and my mind was blown. It turns out that at that time, sack bunts and sack flies were combined and recorded together as sacrifice hits.
Okay.
So those figures include both. You have to imagine some of them were sack flies, but not all of them. We do know for sure from game-by-game accounts that even the year he hit 60 home runs, at least 3 of his sacrifice hits were bunts. And you have to think he goes on his own with that it's a situational thing, because like we talked about, he's just got, the talent, the baseball IQ. He can do whatever he wants. I'm sure he would have hit a home run if he wanted to. There's some situational reason that he decided to put a bunt down, but that's the kind of player that he was. The guy has a season with 417 total bases, and he still bunts 3 times. The guy has a 1,200 OPS, and he's going to play situational baseball because, he loved the game, he excelled at the game, all aspects of it. And, like you mentioned before, he was not just a great baseball player, but really kind of the first international sports superstar, period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I mean, the barnstorming tours, they were global, a little different back then. In those days, it wasn't as easy to get around as much, but he did play globally. And part of those barnstorming games, I know you said at the beginning of your show, that was before the leagues were integrated, but he had some great numbers against Negro League teams. They had some, all-star games, exhibition games. Between 1930 and 20 and 31, he hit 463 with 11 homers, and this was against some of the greatest pitchers to ever throw the baseball, such as Satchel Paige. He hit 444 against Satchel, against the Monarchs, probably the best team ever in league or league baseball, 461, and he just played amazing baseball against even the greatest competition. It would have been really interesting to see over 154 games at the time how he would have done against these guys. But you can only go by the body of work that's there, and some of this record keeping might be off. There might be missing games and stuff like that. But he still definitely was able to hit against these great players. That he wasn't, they weren't allowed to play against him in Major League Baseball back in those early days. What do you feel about some of his numbers against these teams, these all-star teams in the barnstorming games?
Yeah, I think it's just like it's a small sample, right? It's a couple dozen games, but like you said, he played against some of the great stars of the Negro League of his day. Some of his, he also hit over 400 against the Cuban stars. Mm-hmm. So he went down to Cuba, played against some of the greatest players to come from that country, and his numbers were very, very impressive against all of them. And, Ruth himself would have been a huge supporter of integration. I think he would have loved to see the most talented players on the field playing against each other. I think he would have loved it. He would have loved the challenge. He would have relished it. And I think he still would have been great. And, one of the biggest regrets is because the Negro Leaguers were not allowed to play in MLB, we don't have that reliable, complete record keeping. I would have loved to see, we have records of Babe Ruth playing 2,500 games. Could you imagine a full documented career of Josh Gibson, of Satchel Paige, of some of these guys? I mean, Josh Gibson might have hit 800 home runs, right? And we don't know it.
Yeah. It is the record keeping. You can find some sites out there that do a great job in trying to compile what is available out there, and really going through nooks and crannies to find these things. But like you mentioned, Josh Gibson, who's a catcher too, which puts wear and tear on your body. He was considered the Babe Ruth of the Negro Leagues. The guy was just a natural hitter, an amazing hitter. So it would have been really a pleasure as a baseball I consider myself not a historian, but I'm a throwback guy. I'm into that original stuff. I like the early days of the game. So reading about those leagues like that to me would have been to be able to see accurate stats would be amazing. And you mentioned the Cubans before. Cristobal Soto was one of the guys. He pitched in the Negro and in the MLB that Ruth played against in some of these barnstorming. I don't know if he was, let me see, I do have, just 2 for 4, a short, very small body of work against that. But Babe Ruth, to me, even at the end of his career, I mean, his last at bat, he hit a home run for the Boston Braves. I mean, so it's like there's so much folklore, the called shot and all of that. People debate that at Wrigley, and not being able to be a manager. I think it's not a big secret. Babe was a big drinker, and that probably was the reason why he was never able to really go far. He coached first base for the Brooklyn Dodgers for a short period of time, I believe in 38 and 39. Do you think that the game made a mistake not keeping the Babe around in some kind of capacity, managerial, most likely?
Well, it's tough, right? Because his most marketability would have been during these superhuman playing years. After he hung it up, he still sort of had that celebrity status, but, his lifestyle was a mess, and he was not in great health. Obviously, he passed away pretty young.
Yeah.
Drinking, smoking. He had some rough years on him. And, I don't know. Part of me thinks that the reason, the fact that we were deprived of sort of a long post-career Babe Ruth almost makes him more of like a folk hero or a legend for what he did during his playing days.
Excellent point. Yeah, almost like keep him in the shadows because he was, he wasn't living a great life. I mean, the guy was just, he was a maniac. I mean, to put it mildly, or not so mildly. But he lived life to its fullest. I mean, every time you see pictures of him, even when he was older, he's always smiling. And it seemed like he was just a guy that enjoyed life. I think it broke his heart a little bit, that the Yankees didn't want to. I mean, with that famous video with the unconditional release from the Yankees, and then he went to the Braves, who the second division's not even putting a label on it. I mean, they were real bottom of the barrel at the time. But it was cool that he was able to go not only back to Boston, but now to play in the National League, even if it was just for part of that 1935 season. I mean, back then the leagues only saw each other in the World Series. and then later on the All-Star game. So it was a big difference being in the National League. I mean, I'm sure he was basically facing pitchers he probably never saw in his career, because guys didn't move around as much as they ended up doing later on and later today. What's your opinion on his short stint in Boston as a National Leaguer?
Well, it was just 28 games, I think. Obviously he was 40. He was washed up. Part of me thinks he should have retired, instead of leaving the Yankees. But at the same time, nobody wants to go out on someone else's terms. And like a true folk hero, I think he hit his last 3 home runs all in the same game.
That's amazing. Three dingers in a game, and then he hangs it. I mean, it's almost like, it's like, it's not a good time to go, but it probably was the perfect time to go because he didn't. And I kind of feel the same way you do. I have a similar sentiment that he should have retired as a Yankee. But I think after he hit those homers, he probably was, day to day with that. Am I gonna, how much longer am I gonna keep this up? So it's amazing to think, like, what would he have done the next day if he played one more day, so, to put more on that 714. Now, what is your opinion on some of these comparisons that people try to do, i.e. Shohei Ohtani, because of the pitching thing, obviously, but just like as, great baseball players, home run hitters, people try to say Mike Trout's the best player of all time. I mean, to me, it's laughable to even bring a modern day guy like that into the conversation. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, if we're going to talk GOATs, we're going to talk Hank Aaron, Willie Mays, Lou Gehrig, Babe Ruth, Joe D. Pretty much ends there for me. What is your short list of GOATs, considering you have Babe at the top? What comes in after that for you?
For me, I have Ruth and Aaron are right near the top.
Mm-hmm.
For me, Gehrig is probably top 3 also. I think, Henry Aaron obviously had a lot to deal with in terms of, some of the conditions he faced.
Mm-hmm.
And the racism and resentment that he was chasing the Babe's record. And, he had some heavy burdens to carry. And I really respect and admire everything about Hank Aaron and the way, the way he played, the way he spent his post-playing career. Just a tremendous guy, tremendous ball player. But when you look at the numbers, the totals, the rate stats, everything, I mean, looking at Ruth's baseball reference page makes your jaw drop. So
it does, yes.
I have a couple stats for you just to illustrate, give some perspective to this.
Mm-hmm. Throw them out there, bro.
In 2022, Aaron Judge set the AL record for home runs in a season, right? He hit 62 home runs.
Mm-hmm.
He led the majors in runs, homers, ribbies, OBP, slugging, OPS plus, total bases, won MVP easily.
Mm-hmm.
Judge that season slugged 686. Ruth's career slugging was 690. Ruth, for 22 years, had a slugging higher than Aaron Judge the year he hit 62 bombs. You might remember in 1995, Albert Bell of the Cleveland Indians put up the only season in big league history with at least 50 doubles and 50 homers.
Mm-hmm.
And he did it in a strike-shortened year. He had over 100 extra base hits in a strike year. He slugged 690 that season. That was Ruth's career slugging for 22 years.
Yeah.
From 1915 to 1935, it's a 20-year period, Babe Ruth by himself hit more home runs than the Boston Red Sox. Straight from the let that sink in, folks file. Think about these stats and just pretty soon you spend enough time with these numbers and any arguments about these comparisons go away because nobody does anything like that anymore. No. Nobody out-homers entire teams for 20 years. Nobody slugs almost 700 for 2 decades. Are you familiar with OPS plus as a stat?
A little bit. My son tries to fill me in on these new numbers, and I just keep saying I don't want to hear them. But give me a little bit. I'll probably kind of get the gist of it.
Yeah. So I'm not the biggest analytics evangelist. I'm not the biggest war guy, but OPS plus is one that I've come to like because it takes your OPS, which is an objective measure, right? It's just your OBP plus your slugging.
Yeah. But
it normalizes it based on a given year so that the hitter with the average OPS in the league is exactly 100. So if somebody has 120, that means you're 20% better than average. Somebody's OPS plus is 80, you're 20% worse than average.
Okay. So 100 is the barometer, basically, where you're going from.
Exactly. And then you see how far above or below 100 a player is. Mm-hmm. Babe Ruth is the all-time career OPS plus leader. His is 206, meaning that he's more than twice as good as the average hitter for his entire career. He played from 1914 to 1935, and throughout it all, he was more than twice as good as the average big league hitter.
It's unbelievable when you try to put today's these newfangled stats into these older players. More than twice better than the average guy. It just goes to show you the thing that I always said what really makes a big deal to me, and it's not always an indication because you have great players, i.e. Ernie Banks, that's never won, but 7 World Series titles for Ruth, 3 of them with the Red Sox. I mean, a lot of people just think, he was on those Yankee teams and they were dominant and dynasty and all of that. But he won 3 as a Red Sox as a pitcher. I know in 18 he was hitting more and stuff like that, and then in 19 he was playing a lot more outfield, and then 20 he went to the Yanks. But so he had 2 World Series titles as a pitcher, and he pitched really, really good in the postseason, beating, I think, was it the Cubs and the Brooklyn Dodgers, I think, were their 2 opponents, if I'm not mistaken. So this is a guy, that's why I always talk about Yogi being one of the best players in that conversation. Not top 3, but in the top 10, because he has 10 World Series titles, and he was a catcher. And he later in his career, he played the outfield with the Yanks. Most famously, the Mazeroski walk-off 61. That's Yogi in left field at Forbes Field in Pittsburgh. So Babe Ruth, all of these titles that he had. But the one thing that I thought was kind of weird, he only won 1 batting title and 1 MVP. Now, was MVP? Help me out here. Did they start that later on? Was it something that they did earlier, or was it late during his career when they started giving that out?
So they had it, but during that era, you could only win it once, and then you were no longer eligible.
Ah, okay. And I know there was only 1 MVP. Wasn't it 1 MVP that was for baseball, not just in the NL, NAL?
Yeah, I think it was a combined MVP, and once you won it, you couldn't win it again.
Okay, so that explains, because how could he not win, especially in 27? I know, was it Garrick won that year, but he had just a ridiculous batting average and a boatload of homers too. But Ruth wins it in 23, the first year of Yankee Stadium, and the All-Star game started, I think 33 was the first year, right? So Ruth only had 2 All-Star season, because then we know 35. That was the year he retired. But even in 32, when they beat the Cubs in the World Series, I mean, the Chicago Wrigley faithful were really riding him hard because he was older back then, and that's what the called shot comes from. And that really bad video, I still say he calls the shot. Does he look like he's pointing to the Cubs dugout or center field to you?
Oh, he's calling his shot.
Right, there you go. Yeah. I mean, the Cubs dugout, he'd have to turn to his right. He's in the left-handed batter's box. They're the first base dugout. Why would he be pointing straight towards, like the pitcher's mound, which i.e. would be center field past the pitcher? I mean, there's many great players that have been in baseball, but you and I both are in total agreement that the Babe is the best of the best. Not Guy 80, we're going to have to leave it there because we're going to run out of time. Please, once again, give out all your sites, what you're selling, your apparel, and your Twitter or whatever else. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Joe. You can follow me on Twitter at NotGuyEddie, and I've got a link on there to my Redbubble merch store. We have some really hilarious designs. Some of them are tongue-in-cheek. I think one of my favorites is combined no-hitters aren't real.
And I agree.
Yeah, they're all in good fun, but we're here to celebrate baseball in general, all the great players, especially the underrated and underappreciated ones, but also the undisputed greats like Babe Ruth. I mean, can't spend enough time looking at his numbers and finding new ways of just realizing how insanely dominant he was.
Yep, definitely. And make sure you follow at NotGuy80, Gaetti, obviously for Gary Gaetti, on Twitter, and hit his link there. Thanks so much for joining us this week on Muscle Sport Media Live, MuscleSportMag.com. We'll see you guys in a week.
Noah, I have a job for you.
Jeez, it's not another arc, is it?
No, not again. This time I need a full-scale home renovation.
Noah Construction and Builders is your design and build partner. We do it all, from additions and dormers to full-scale renovations. Schedule your no-cost design consultation today. Visit us online at noahconstruction-builders.com.
Noah Construction and Builders. Through dreams we design, with vision we build.
WGBB 1240 AM and 95.9 FM have time slot available. If you're interested in it and you need a desire to put a show on, we here at WGBB 1240 AM will help you to put this program together, whatever the show is. Why don't you give us a call at 516-623-1240, WGBB AM 1240. And we certainly will work with you in your budget, and we certainly will find a time slot for you. Give us a call, 516-623-1240. Ask for Gavin and Trevor, right here on WGBB 1240 AM and 95.9 FM.
This is WGBB AM 1240 and W240 DF-FM 95.9 Freeport, New York. And 95.9 FM has time slots available for anyone who wants to host their own radio show. 516-623-1240. You have probably just asked yourself, what kind of show could I do? Well, let me ask you, what are you passionate about? Is it reading, cooking, music? How about health and wellness? Or maybe you enjoy learning and talking about history, current events, interview others in their related fields. 516-623-1240. You can host a show at a station that's been a part of our community for over 80 years. So what do you say? I say call 516-623-1240. Be a producer. Host your own radio program. 516-623-1240. WGBB and 95.9 FM is the station that serves...